Welcome to the Academic Woman Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, tenured full professor, mom of three, and firm believer that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. There's so much writing advice out there. And one of the things that you'll hear people say, and heck, I even have said it a lot, is that you should make a date with your writing. What does that mean? And why is it so dang hard? That's what we're talking about in this podcast episode. Now, what I mean when I say that you need to make a date with your writing is that you should put it on your calendar as an event or as an appointment, just like any other event or appointment. Okay, most people can do that part. It's not super easy to do that part, and I can talk about that in a second. But the second part is the harder part, which is keeping that date, right? And honoring that time that you set aside for writing. A lot of times what happens is we look at our calendar and we say, okay, I'm going to set a writing block for this Thursday afternoon from 2 to 4. And we get to Thursday afternoon and nobody is leaning over our shoulder and telling us that we have to use that block for writing. And maybe we're feeling a little tired. Other things have come up between when we put that on our calendar and the moment that we're supposed to be writing. And so maybe it just doesn't seem that important or even that urgent. And there's tons of other urgent things you could be doing. They're easier to do, right? Like maybe they're smaller tasks, checking email. Although we all say how much we hate it, it can be kind of a go-to thing when we are piddling time. So other tasks that aren't writing can creep into that writing time. So that's what I really want to talk about today is how do you make and keep a date with your writing? So let's start with making these dates easier to keep by making them consistent. Now, you'll know if you're a fan of the podcast, if you've listened before, I am never going to tell you that you need to write every day. I think it's an unrealistic goal. I think people who do that and find success there, that is just so wonderful. But I don't want to set that as some kind of invisible standard because it's not. And you can get a lot of writing done even if you don't write every day. But what I do stress is consistency. Okay. So a lot of times we think we need to save up big blocks of time to write. And that makes sense because, writing is an activity of creation. It takes thought and thoughtfulness and having big stretches of time in which to accomplish that thoughtfulness sounds super appealing. And also maybe that's how you got writing done before, right? So if we think about our habits as writers, few of us are people who wrote every day from elementary school on through our academic careers. In fact, a lot of us wrote papers at the last minute or didn't set our attention to a paper for undergrad or even grad school sometimes until the week it was due. Like, let's just be real and admit that. But that's not the kind of deadline-driven writing that most academics do. Like, most academics are doing writing that doesn't have a deadline on it. Submitting to journals, you're not usually trying to meet a certain deadline. So that kind of binge up to the deadline way of approaching your writing is not going to work, or it will seldom work, or it won't work forever. So instead, what we want, so if we don't want every day and we don't want binge writing, what do we want? Consistency. And consistency just means regular. So it doesn't mean that you need to have a certain amount of days per week. It can just be 1 day per week. It doesn't mean that you have to do a certain number of hours or a certain number of Pomodoros, which are 25-minute sessions. it doesn't mean that. It could be one Pomodoro. It could be two. It could be 1 hour once a week, but that's consistent. So in fact, what I encourage you to do is to start there with 1 hour once a week. Don't try to do like everybody does, like in January, right? Where it's like, I'm going to make a resolution and I'm going to eat, this certain way, or I'm going to do exercise every day, and it lasts for a small amount of time. And then you just go back to your old habits. Like, that's not what we want you to do with writing either. So don't think, okay, in 2021, I'm going to write every day. No. Go for consistency and start super small. That's going to make it easier for you to keep that date. Now, I do want you to put that date in your calendar, and I do want you to be operating with a calendar. So let me just back up there a second too. Like, if you're not organizing yourself using a planner or a digital calendar like Google Calendar, you absolutely need to be doing that as a professional. You need to keep a calendar. Please take my advice from someone who often had, I guess, a really good memory. And I was able to hold appointments and important dates in my head without a calendar for a really long time. But that doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. If you are a person who's like, I just hold everything in my head, like, you will eventually not be able to do that. So you should find a planner or even just use a to-do list or something. But I would prefer you to have a calendar where you could plan out your week and reserve 1 hour once a week for writing. It's going to be easier to keep a date if you go for consistency than if you go for everydayness or binging. The other reason to start small, so to start with a half an hour or an hour, I prefer an hour. I think a half an hour for me is too short personally, but whatever. To start small is that you're more likely to keep that date with your writing if it's small. If you write onto your schedule, or you place onto your schedule a 3-hour writing session, it's harder to hold that space for writing because it's really like almost half of a workday, right? So I encourage you that if you're having trouble keeping a date with your writing, start small, just an hour once a week, and go for consistency. Make it the same day and same time every week. The other thing that I always used to do, that when I switched up, I was much more successful. What I used to do was hold Fridays as writing days. And I realized soon that Fridays, by the time you get to Friday, you're often tired. Maybe you're like, well, I could write, or I could just run this extra errand that I wouldn't have to do this weekend. And so maybe I'll do that. Or there's just so much opportunity for things to come up during the week that will derail your Friday writing time, that I suggest making that 1 hour a week happen on a Monday or Tuesday before the week gets away from you, before you feel those, the case of the Fridays that makes you kind of itchy for the weekend. Like, get your writing done, your 1 hour, your precious hour that we're starting out with, on a Monday or Tuesday, and see how that feels. That will also, what we want to do here, right, is set you up for success with keeping that date. So do your 1 hour consistently every week. Let's make it on a Monday or Tuesday. And if possible, and if it works for you, maybe thinking about doing it in the morning. Now, I encourage you to go back, especially to episode 2, where I really break down this idea of finding for yourself what I'm now calling your soaring state. And what that means is that time of day where you have this kind of invisible energy holding you aloft, and it doesn't feel like difficult to sit down and concentrate on a writing project. And that really does have to do with your energy flows during the day. So you can go and listen back to especially podcast episode number 2 for more about that. But I want you to know that really, if you're having trouble making a date with your writing that you keep, that yes, it would be great to be able to do your 1 hour during your soaring session, but more importantly is the practice of holding that hour, holding that space for writing. So that's why I'm suggesting try early in the week, try early in the day, and see if it's easier for you to hold that space, that 1 hour that we're talking about right now for your writing. All right, what else keeps you from keeping that date with your writing? Well, some of you will articulate it as accountability, right? Like, oh, I don't have anyone who is holding me accountable to keeping that space for my writing or making that date and holding it with my writing. So I want to talk a little bit about accountability. Nobody is holding you accountable for brushing your teeth. No one is holding you accountable for wearing pants in public. These are just things that we do, right? We brush our teeth because it is healthy for ourselves as humans, right? So I want you to think about writing, like that idea that we need some kind of outsider telling us to do it, or we need a deadline to hold us accountable, is an idea that kind of, well, one, devalues writing, because writing is so very important for your career, but also devalues your own perception of what is important. So if you keep saying like, oh, I don't write because I don't have accountability, or I don't write because I don't have somebody holding me accountable. I need a write. So I hear this a lot. I need a writing partner because I need somebody to hold me accountable. When you say things like that, you're devaluing your writing, and you're devaluing your ability to stand up for yourself, to hold boundaries. And those are things that you need to strengthen, especially as you go through your career, holding boundaries around your time, valuing your writing. All of those things are practices, muscles that you need to build and flex. And when we say, I need somebody else to keep me accountable, then what you're doing is it's an excuse in a way to not build those muscles for yourself. So you can say that you want a writing partner because it makes things more joyful and it helps give you energy. Like, I'm definitely a proponent of co-writing, writing together with other people, because of that kind of shared energy and the excitement. And it is kind of an excitement of seeing other people like getting the work done. Writing is something that's so kind of behind the scenes and solitary a lot of times, that watching other people do it and knowing that you are at the same time as other people creating something can really give you that soaring feeling, that uplifted, supported feeling that is hard to get any other way. It's hard to get by ourselves. But that's not accountability. Accountability would be somebody, I feel like it's very paternalistic. It's like somebody telling you what to do. That's not what you need. What you need is community, support, and starting to flex those muscles of boundary setting, boundary holding, and time valuing. So one of the reasons to set a date with your writing and keep it is because the act of doing that helps you to flex those boundary muscles and understand that your time is important, and trust yourself. Trust that you know what's best for you. Tara Moore, in her book, Playing Big, calls this your inner mentor. So trust your inner mentor that says, I need an hour a week to write. And I deserve an hour a week to write, right? So you're developing that skill of listening to the inner mentor. You're developing that skill of holding boundaries, of valuing your time, in addition to developing your writing, right? When you make and keep a date with your writing. And that's the big idea that I really want you to take away from this episode. You don't need to keep dates with your writing so that you can tick off on your list a certain number of minutes of writing or words on the page. That's one way to measure your writing practice. And if those work for you, there's certainly times to use those as tools for measuring how well you're doing in your writing practice. But making a date with your writing and keeping it helps you to put the proper amount of importance on writing, and therefore the proper amount of importance on yourself, on your boundaries, on your time, on the inner mentor who's telling you what to do, which is to take time and do your writing and get your big message into the world. That's the real reason to keep a date with your writing. And that's what you accomplish the more times, the more frequently you make and keep a date with your writing, the better you're going to get at all of those things, and your writing practice will only grow. Now, I want to leave you with some very practical advice for how to keep this date. And what we've done, we knew this was such a problem for people that we created a program that is really almost, like completely about this problem, this making and keeping a date with your writing that so many people struggle with. And we decided to create a program around that. It's called Momentum, and it's a program that offers you pre-set up writing times where you can co-write with other people all around the world. And the reason for this, the promise of the program, is that you will train yourself to make and keep dates with your writing. So let me explain how it works. First, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, co-writing or writing with somebody else, this can be done in person or virtually. In the Momentum program, we do it virtually. And all you do is you get on Zoom, you're muted. We have a place where you use the chat to put your goals in there. We also keep a spreadsheet where you can track your goals. You put your goals in the chat, you work, you can see other people's heads, diligently working. And then about 10 minutes before the end, you report on how you did. And again, we have a spreadsheet where we also you can track your goals. But basically, the purpose of this co-writing session is to give you a date and time on the calendar to show up and experience the energy of writing with other people. It's easier somehow to keep that date if you know other people are going to be there, and if you know that you paid for a program that is about this. So it's officially like your writing group, right? And so it's a little harder to ignore that when you put it in your calendar than when you're just putting your own time to write in your calendar. So that's one of the reasons that co-writing works, is because it gives you it scaffolds you into making time to write and keeping dates with your writing yourself without the help of others. Our program offers 6 group writing times and an always open Zoom link for co-writing. So really, any time of day, you can find other people to write together. But we have 6 group times that are spaced throughout the day so that you can find a time that works for you and your schedule. And those 6 times happen Monday through Friday. We do take holidays off, although not all the people in the community do. So people will still meet at their time, even if we're off for a holiday. And people often meet on the weekends as well, but we don't have coaches in the groups on the weekends. Anyway, we have 6 writing times, not because you should be writing 3 or 6 hours every day, but rather so that you have a bunch of different times to choose from. And I'm going to go back to what I said at the top of this episode, which is that if you decide to enroll in Momentum, which costs $27 a month, you can start out by just committing to 1 hour, just one of those times once a week. And then you have other times to choose from as you build that muscle for keeping the date with your writing. But you can start with just 1 hour a week, choose one, commit to it, and you're off to the races. Another thing we do inside of our Momentum program, again, to help you build those muscles around making a date and keeping a date with your writing is that we have a Monday mindset call. If you're unfamiliar with what mindset is, kind of the set of beliefs that you have around something. And what we want to do is on Mondays, we do this Monday mindset call that's 30 minutes long that is really about kind of setting your mind right for getting your writing done during the week. So those two parts of this momentum program are really the key ones that we've developed that address specifically this problem of making and keeping a date with your writing. The momentum mindset call will help you kind of figure out your writing blocks, things that are holding you back, and in just half an hour, help work you through, setting those firm boundaries and trusting your inner mentor and all of those things that I was mentioning earlier. And then we have our writing times where you sit down on the Zoom and write with others. If you're interested in our Momentum program, it is open for enrollment. It costs $27 a month. There's also a yearly rate, and you can cancel anytime as long as you cancel, within a certain amount of time before your next pay date. You can cancel. So really, it's worth trying for $27 a month to see if you can start to learn to flex that muscle to make and keep a date with your writing. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time loving on yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you're feeling pulled in 1,000 directions and can't seem to carve out time to write, I've got a solution for you. Go grab my 10 ways to make time to write cheat sheet. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time to learn my best quick tips for putting writing at the center of your career where it belongs. We'll link that up in the show notes. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time.